Hi, I'm Kristen Hodgden, an IVF mom, proud women's health advocate, and co-founder of Rescripted. Welcome to From First Period to Last Period, a science-backed health and wellness podcast dedicated to shining a light on all of the women's health topics that have long been considered taboo. From UTIs to endometriosis, we're amplifying women's needs and voices because we know there's so much more to the female experience than what happens at the doctor's office. With From First Period to Last Period, we're doing the legwork on your whole body so you can be the expert in you. Now let's dive in. According to endowhat.com, endometriosis is tissue similar but not identical to the lining of the uterus that is found elsewhere in the body. This tissue can cause pelvic pain, inflammation, and infertility, to name just a few of the many symptoms. Endometriosis affects over 200 million people worldwide. However, the condition remains shrouded in stigma, leaving many people undiagnosed and in chronic pain. This needs to change. From real endo stories to actionable tips for dealing with flare-ups, in this 4-episode mini-season of From First Period to Last Period, we're rescripting the conversation around endometriosis, because debilitating period pain is not normal. Brought to you by Rescripted and Receptiva DX, the only test that can identify leading causes of unexplained infertility in a single sample, including endometriosis, progesterone resistance, and endometritis. Visit Receptiva DX to learn more. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to From First Period to Last Period. I'm your host, Kristen Hodgden, and this month is all about endometriosis. Today, I'm thrilled to have Dr. Kiki Failing with me. Hi, Dr. Failing.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
So happy to have you here. And today we're going to be discussing all things endometriosis and mental health. So for those of you who don't know, Dr. Failing, she is a licensed psychologist and expert in dialectical behavior therapy, also known as DBT. She specializes in borderline personality disorder, self-harm, trauma, and LGBTQ mental health. And she also personally suffers from endometriosis. So welcome, Dr. Failing. I want to dive right in and talk about your own journey with endometriosis and how it's come full circle with your experience as a therapist.
Yeah, totally. So I was diagnosed with endo after seeing a specialist maybe about 2.5 years ago at this point, maybe 3. And that was after years of dealing with some symptoms that I now understand are endo. I had gone to previous healthcare professionals asking for help with the pelvic pain I was experiencing. I would say probably for at least 4 years prior to I got the diagnosis. And getting the diagnosis was so revolutionary in helping my mental health related to the chronic pain that I had been experiencing. And I'm sure we'll talk about this, but my experience of needing 4 years of seeing doctors is actually fast for getting a diagnosis for endometriosis, which is so sad.
So it was 4 years from your onset of symptoms or your growing concern?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just.
And did you have to get multiple opinions?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The 4 years, I did go back to one of the doctors at the time, twice, talking to them about it, and they did various tests, found nothing. But besides that, I had seen probably 5 different physicians prior to the one that diagnosed me. So yeah, it was quite an adventure.
Wow. And was that an OBGYN or an endo specialist? Okay.
She was an OBGYN who specialized in endo, and that's partly why I sought her out, because I was starting to have a more strong suspicion that it was that.
Yeah, no, that seems to be the common theme. You need someone who knows endo really well and specializes it in order to have them take your symptoms seriously a lot of the time.
For sure. And I think part of, I don't think it's the huge issue, but part of the issue is some of my symptoms are more abnormal. The worst of my pain is around ovulation rather than around menstruation.
Okay.
She was the first person to say so confidently and say, oh no, that's definitely a way that this can look. So I think that's partly maybe why previous doctors missed it. But yeah, it's important to find a specialist for that reason too.
Wow. Yeah. Your story is everyone's journey with endo is so unique, but the common theme seems to be having to get multiple opinions and suffer for years on end. And the average is 7 to 10 years to diagnosis. And I'm glad you have your answer. So how did that impact your mental health once you had that validation?
Yeah. So I do think that brings up why I think DBT can be so good for endo, actually, because We know from research, let alone personal experience, that being repeatedly invalidated can actually cause mental health problems. The more that we are told that our internal experiences don't make sense, that they're weird, that they're bad, that we're crazy, the more upset we get, understandably.
Mhm.
And so chronic invalidation in any form, but including in the form of I am struggling with this intense pelvic pain and doctors saying that's normal cramps, or I don't see anything wrong with you, I have nothing for you, can feel incredibly invalidating, obviously, and then also cause a lot of emotional distress.
Mhm.
And so, even just getting the diagnosis and understanding the diagnosis and what's going on in my body is validating and is inherently calming to all of the anxiety, some of the intense kind of shame and sadness I was feeling. And that's played out in what we do in DBT as well. DBT is a therapy that was designed to help people who experience really intense emotions and struggle with impulsivity, and specifically was designed to help people with BPD, borderline personality disorder. And the idea is that their emotional struggles come from chronic invalidation. So DBT was created to help
Wow.
people who have been chronically invalidated and struggle with mental health problems because of that. Getting my diagnosis was inherently validating and centering and helped me actually feel like I had things that I could do to mental health and help my physical health. But then
Mhm.
all of the skills from DBT just came in so naturally to then help me figure out, okay, now what? And how do I handle the complexities and struggles of having this disease?
Yeah, I don't have endo, but I do have an autoimmune disease. And when I was getting diagnosed, my number one symptom was just like crushing fatigue. And I
Mhm.
remember just being like, okay, I have 2-year-old twins. It's a global pandemic. Maybe I just can't hack it. And I'm just like exhausted. And it was so validating when I finally got the answer of your TSH is through the roof and you have thyroid nodules and you need to get on medication stat, and it can just open up. Obviously there's a whole other layer of like grief to getting a diagnosis, but like just that initial, like it wasn't all in my head, is so powerful.
Yeah, like I'm not crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing like inherently wrong with me that I can't hack it, that I'm sensitive to pain, that I'm X, Y, or Z, any of the internal shame thoughts that are so common in chronic
Mm.
invalidation. So, yeah, it's just totally the grief, like you said, and the stress of having a chronic health condition now that you have a diagnosis. But it's so liberating to just be like, okay, this is what it is. Now what?
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me more about DBT, or how has it helped you specifically, or what are some, if someone is dealing with those thoughts of, is it all in my head? Like, how can it help them? Or what are some actionable things that people can start thinking about?
Man, I think that's why I love this so much, because I just see so much possibility. There are so many things in DBT that can help with something like endo, also PCOS, and any kind of chronic health issue, honestly. I guess before I dive in, it feels important to me to say that right now there isn't any research looking at DBT specifically for helping folks with endo. But there is some research showing that cognitive behavioral therapy, that mindfulness based techniques, that relaxation strategies can help. And a lot of those things are in DBT. So it's
Wow.
a lovely kind of mix that there's some science that supports the use of DBT, but I've certainly found it personally useful and in a number of ways. I think that one of the biggest things that make DBT so helpful for endo is the D in DBT stands for dialectics. And a dialectic is the recognition that two opposing things can be true at the same time. And the biggest one is acceptance versus change. Like, how can we both accept reality as it is and work to change it when we don't like it? And chronic pain, chronic health issues, that is literally the dynamic constantly. Acknowledging that we have this disease, disorder, pain, whatever it is, and still do things to work towards changing it.
Oh my gosh. Like, I always say that is the biggest realization and like game changing thought that changed my life when I was going through infertility originally, was that two things can be true at once. Like, you can be grateful for what you have,
Mm.
but also really want to grow your family. And it's even more true now that I'm dealing with secondary infertility, because I can be grateful for the children I have and also still want more and be sad that my body doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And oh my God, I think that it's still so hard to accept the things you cannot change, but it's important to just realize that you can feel multiple things at once.
And I think you said it perfectly. And I think the thing that you said that stands out to me is it's really hard to accept the things you cannot change. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about DBT. Some people don't like it, but I love the way that it provides really concrete skills and techniques to help you both with the acceptance side and the change side. And that's where it just offers tons of opportunities to help with the various symptoms and difficulties, whether it's the grief, the pain itself, the problem solving of, okay, what medical treatments to do. It offers lots of options.
Wow. So can you share a little bit about the dynamic between acceptance and change and like how that would be put into practice?
Yeah. So perhaps it's easiest just to talk about how like I've approached it. So
Mhm.
acceptance in DBT, at least, and in most places, we often mean acceptance as an acknowledgement, right? So not acceptance as an approval. Yeah, this is great. I love this. Obviously not, but acknowledging, okay, I have endo. I have a disease that right now has no cure, that causes me X, Y, and Z symptoms, and that has X, Y, or Z options to deal with, some of which I've tried and haven't worked, et cetera. Like just breaking down what is true about your situation.
Mhm.
Then change is about, okay, given those facts, what is my reality? What am I dealing with? And then what are my options and how do I choosing very mindfully how to move forward? So this
Mhm.
can be problem solving. Okay, what are the medical options? What are the psychological options? What have I tried so far? What has made a change? What hasn't? Pros and cons, deciding really actively, okay, how am I going to try to address this and doing it stage by stage? But then change also in the form of making small changes to make the pain more bearable at certain times. So when I'm in a flare, like changing my environment, asking for help, asking for support, making sure that I'm eating certain things or wearing certain clothing or doing activities that are easier and more pleasurable for me when I'm having that pain. And emphasizing that in a way I might not on other days where I'm feeling less vulnerable and less pain and
Mhm.
better in general. And it's about just like constantly going back and forth between that because a lot of times in the flares of pain, you do not feel up to do a deep dive of research of the newest medication or reading the pros and cons of surgery. So doing what you can in those moments just to tolerate and make it easier through what we call distress tolerance skills in DBT, just like the self-soothing and distraction and things like that.
No, that makes total sense. And thank you for explaining that further. Reminds me of when I've been down a long road of infertility. I have PCOS, Hashimoto's, and for a while I took a break from IVF for like the past year basically. And I started working with a nutritionist and doing all these holistic things to try to get my period back and get pregnant
Mhm.
naturally and all this stuff. And then I'd go to therapy, and my therapist specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy. And she'd be like, yeah, and I'd be lamenting that like all of the things I'm doing are still not getting me pregnant, basically. And
Yes.
she'd say, but do have two chronic illnesses. It's a perfect illustration of that because you have to accept your body's shortcomings in a way, but you're still doing all of these things to help improve your health and well-being and your fertility.
Mhm.
And in my case, it's actually come full circle because I did not get pregnant, but I did end up saying, okay, I'm putting too much pressure on myself
Mhm.
to make my body do something that it doesn't want to do. But I have done a ton of things to improve my health. And I'm going to go back and give IVF one more shot. And I just had a successful egg retrieval, and my egg quality at 30, almost 35, was better than it was at 28 for my
Oh,
last egg retrieval. And I feel like, so it's okay. No, I didn't get pregnant yet, but that stuff that I did along the way still got me somewhere.
mhm.
I don't know. All of that to say, sometimes it's just not linear.
Totally. Totally. Thank you for bringing up that example, because I also think it captures something that a lot of my clients, let alone I, have struggled with, of the balance between these acceptance and change. Okay, you're not having the success you would have liked with getting pregnant. And can you, on one side, both see the ways in which your health changes have made positive changes that are great, and let's not discount them, right? While at the same time, you can have grief and frustration at things not working out the way you wanted them to. You can have both, where can we both validate and feel and accept and respect and love what is true and painful and want it, while also not making sure we're not adding on to it with all or nothing thinking or catastrophizing or anything else that makes things worse in our suffering.
Yeah, and it can be hard in 2024 because we talk about this a lot at Rescripted, like the mental load of being on Instagram and TikTok and constantly being told you can cure your chronic illness and you can do XYZ to get your period back. And listen, there are a lot of things that I've done that have improved my cycles and reduced inflammation, and but it's not a one size fits all. And I think people can put a lot of self-blame on themselves when it doesn't work for them, when really think about gut health. Like everyone has different trigger foods, everyone has different things that upset their stomach. It's like kind of the same way when it comes to health and wellness. It's what exercise works for you might not work for someone else.
Yeah, totally. I can definitely resonate with the idea that social media is frustrating about chronic illness. This brings to mind, there's a concept in DBT, a specific skill that we call skillful means. And it's the balance between what we call doing mind and being mind. This idea of, can we both work towards future goals? So in this case, maybe take certain supplements or exercise and eat in a certain way and do something with the hope that it will positively impact our health in the way we're hoping, while also letting go of an attachment to any future outcome, like just eating well and exercising and being here in this moment exactly as it is, because it feels good, because it's helping our bodies. So like this goal orientation balanced with just here as what is here.
That is what comes to mind when you say that, is like diet culture and like just the feeling of always wanting to control your body and the high intensity exercise and reduced calories. And like any one of us who grew up in the 90s with Cosmopolitan magazine and Victoria's Secret angels, it's ingrained sometimes. And it's taken me specifically like a very long time to get to a place where I'm like eating to nourish my body and working out in a way that feels good instead of in a way that feels forced. And I think a lot of women in their 30s are like on that journey, and it just takes a level of acceptance, like you said. And I don't know, but it's still tough. It's tough to like not have control.
Oh my gosh. So tough. Yeah. Dealing with uncertainty and lack of control about a lot of things in our worlds and our lives. Yeah. I think that's where, going back to the acceptance strategies again, and just anything we can do to cope when life is difficult is all we can do.
Absolutely. So let's see. Are there any other components of DBT that you think are particularly effective? I was doing some research on like mindfulness and emotional regulation and stuff like that.
Yeah, of course. There is some research that shows that women with endo are more likely to rely on what we call suppression as an emotional regulation strategy, where it's just denial or pushing down or like ignoring emotions and like physical pain. And we also know from research that suppression only actually amplifies pain, both physical and emotional. And both the skills of mindfulness and the emotional regulation skills, which involve feeling our emotions, understanding them, and really facing them directly in order to know how to manage and respond to them, are absolutely necessary and so helpful for reducing not only the emotional difficulties related with endo, but potentially like the pain of endo. And to feel our emotions and understand them, it inherently also involves mindfulness. So, yeah, I think that really not running away from pain in various ways is so hard to do, but is really important. And both the skills of mindfulness and skills of emotion regulation broadly are super, super relevant in that way.
Yeah, it's so hard because the mental load, the physical load of being a woman, like I'm just
Mm.
thinking of motherhood. It's like you put yourself last sometimes and push through the pain but yeah, it's like feeling your feelings and
Mhm.
letting yourself sit in it but it's the same thing with pain.
Yeah. And to be clear, this is another place where dialectics comes up. Like you are a mom or you have your life, your stressors, your things you have to get done. So sometimes you do have to push through pain to
Mhm.
be effective, to do things you want to do. So it's again about finding that balance of it. And that requires the mindfulness of checking in with this present moment. What is here right now? What is happening? What is now the most skillful thing that I can do to balance my needs, which are both being the responsible X, Y, or Z identity I have, while also recognizing I'm a human who needs rest and needs care when they're in pain. So every new moment, making that decision is like a mindfulness skill and is going to be helpful across time as well.
And then it goes back to having to give yourself grace because at the end of the
Mm.
day, maybe you don't have the same 24 hours in a day as like someone who's healthy and doesn't have a chronic illness. And your kids aren't noticing that.
Yeah.
They just want you to be present. But inside, it can feel like that guilt and that I wish I could do more. And but yeah, it's a tough balance. But yeah, it's I think a lifelong journey. It's important to note too, where you're not just going to wake up one day and be like, I've accepted my chronic illness and I have learned all the ways that I can make myself feel better and
Yeah.
I've put myself into remission. I don't
Yeah.
think anyone's ever going to get to a point where until there's a literal cure for endometriosis, like
Mhm.
that they're going to be totally at peace with, but you can constantly stay on top of the things that do make you feel good.
100%. And actually, I think that is one of the things that has been most helpful for me. That last thing you said of doing things that make you feel good, whether that's rest, but also, so in DBT, we call this accumulating positives, really just doing things in life that feel pleasure, that are enjoyable, that feel good, and then also doing things that are meaningful for us. And there's plenty of research that shows that in chronic pain in general, it's so common for folks to step away from life because of the pain, right? Oh, I can't go out because I hurt today. And sometimes that's true, to be clear. Or I can't do that thing because that might cause a flare or X, Y, or Z kind of concerns that can cause someone to make their life smaller and smaller. And it can be very helpful to instead be very mindful and purposeful about incorporating positive events and positive emotions into your life by doing pleasurable events or meaningful events for yourself.
Mhm.
And so for chronic pain from any diagnosis, but including endo, that's doing any kind of activity that gives you joy, contentment, connection with others. But in my experience, it's been so helpful to try to think of specific that are pleasurable related to my pelvic space specifically. So I make waist beads, I do abdominal massage,
Oh,
yeah, like heating pads, things like this, so that there is not only a negative connotation with that part of my body, right? That I can appreciate my pelvic area, my womb space as being something that can be enjoyable and pleasurable.
love that.
So it's very powerful in that way too, to focus on doing things that you like.
Yeah. Wow. And do you still have pain?
Yes, not always, but yes, I do.
Okay. But you found certain things that work for you.
Yeah. So when I am actively in pain, those positive events usually don't feel good, right? Abdominal massage when I'm like most in pain and heavy is like painful. So I avoid that then. And during those times when I am in pain, I focus more on the skills that in DBT we call crisis survival skills. So specifically focusing on self-soothing. So the things I mentioned of eating the things I like, or wrapping myself in fuzzy blankets, weighted blankets. I love weighted blankets. Watching TV, I like getting my attention away through distraction on anything that is just bringing my mind away from the pain when it's at its worst.
Mm-hmm.
Doing whatever you can to make it easier to survive that moment.
Yeah. So it's almost how a lot of people preach, like the different phases of your cycle. You have to ask yourself what your body needs in that moment.
Yes. So for me, as I said, it's pretty predictable that my worst symptoms are going to be around ovulation, but it's not the exact same day in my cycle every time. So paying attention to that is helpful too, though. And on the days when I'm in pain, focusing on that crisis survival, just I don't have the energy, I don't have the spoons to do a lot of problem solving and active things, and I'm certainly not going to do anything around my pelvic area because it's in so much pain, distraction, self-soothing. But then for the rest of the cycle, can I do that problem solving? Can I do the positive things when I'm not in pain proactively? Schedule them in even sometimes, like really on my calendar. But yeah, balancing and again, dialectical tensions of do what you can when you can, don't do it when you can't.
Absolutely. So what would one piece of advice be that you would have for someone who might be suffering from endo and feelings of self-blame or feeling like they're going crazy because no one's believing them?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So this is not specific to DBT, but the idea of self-compassion is the thing that is for sure most important here, in my opinion. So self-compassion, at least as defined by Dr. Kristen Neff, who is pretty big in that world, is mindfulness plus self-kindness plus common humanity. This idea of common humanity being I am a human who is struggling in a certain way. And even if my exact struggle is not the same as other people's struggle, we can relate in the fact that we all struggle as humans, just period. Even, for example, I'm sure the way that you said women of a certain age, the Cosmo and the diet culture and all the things, everyone listening is, yep, there's a commonality. And in self-compassion, the powerful and important thing is to recognize that not to blame yourself for having the struggles that you have. There is always a reason that you're struggling the way that you're struggling, whether it's what you have been taught, or it's the way your body's feeling right now, or what you've just generally been through in your life, or what is happening in your reality right now. A huge way to challenge this self-judgment, self-criticism, self-invalidation, because that happens too, is through self-validation of communicating to yourself that it makes perfect sense that you're experiencing what you're experiencing. You might not like it, but it's still there. Again, that radical acceptance. And if you can, finding the kernel of truth in what you're feeling. So, of course, I'm struggling in this way because of this thing. And then if that is true, which it always is, there's always a reason that you're feeling the way you're feeling. What do I need right now accordingly? And then responding to yourself in kindness, that self-kindness part. And that's where the self-soothing and the pleasurable events and the taking breaks and rest and doing what you need for yourself comes into just meeting yourself where you're at, essentially.
Love it. Rest is productive.
Yes, love that.
That's been my MO for the past year. I never used to let myself rest, and it really does make a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's necessary. Even if you want to let go of productivity completely and not rest in order to be productive, like rest is just needed. Rest feels good. We deserve to rest as humans.
Yeah, 100%. Dr. Feeling, this was amazing. I feel like there's so many helpful tidbits that people can pull out, whether they have endo or not. So I appreciate you coming on and imparting your knowledge and being here with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation. I am aware of the ways I did give some specifics, but I threw out a lot of terms from DBT. And so I will say if folks are intrigued and they want to learn more about any of these concrete things I'm talking about, there's lots of resources online, including on my social media and things like that, that you can find more info about what is DBT and how can I actually use it.
Yeah, where can everyone find you?
Sure. My social media is basically almost all the same handle, DBT Kiki, so DBTKI. You can find a lot of resources for free and from other people. I've collected them on my website, which is kikifailing.com. And then I have also written a book about DBT skills.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, called Self-Directed DBT Skills.
Very straight to the point. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you again. Go follow her on Instagram and social. And yeah, we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
If this podcast means something to you, be sure to hit follow or subscribe. This helps you because you'll never miss an episode, and it helps us because you'll never miss an episode. For science-backed women's health content that meets you exactly where you are, head to Rescripted.com or follow us on social at Hello Rescripted.